Check this out. Steve Doocy on Fox News tried to add a little bit of common sense to the discussion this morning on Fox and Friends about why lawyers in general are able to give testimony that is being used in the prosecution of Donald Trump. And really, they're talking about Michael Cohen, because one of the things that the right has started to harp on is, how do you force lawyers to break attorney-client privilege? How is it Michael Cohen is somehow being used to provide evidence against Trump when he was Trump's lawyer? There's a very simple explanation. It's called the crime-fraud exception. Steve Doocy tries to explain it to his co-hosts. They don't want to hear it. When you try to insert fact on Fox and Friends, you aren't rewarded.
So I think there's a lot to fight here. And in the back of my mind in watching all this is we could be doing this 3 more times.
Yeah.
We could be doing it with the January 6th.
Let's hope.
We could be doing it with the Georgia situation, and we could do it with Mar-a-Lago, which is heating up like you wouldn't believe. They are now making Secret Service testify. They make his own attorney, Corcoran, he has to testify his own client.
Well,
what is it? Jack Smith is somehow rocket fueled to get Trump in a way that I can't believe people aren't challenging this and saying, even if I don't like Donald Trump, what's going on here?
Because of the crime, we've talked about this, the crime fraud exemption. If you get legal advice during the execution of a crime,
but it almost never happens.
It happens more than you would believe.
Talk to Mark Levin about that.
Your attorney-client privilege goes out the window. Regarding the Secret Service,
how many times has it happened? It's nuts.
You
have an attorney and...
So 2 arguments. First, they're ignoring the crime fraud exception. Then Brian Kilmeade moves to, well, how often has it actually happened? We're going to address all of these points in a moment.
Secret Service, and you flip them?
I am just talking about what is the law. That is the law.
Rarely used.
That is, well, it was used in this case.
No
kidding.
The
other thing is, I feel like it's open to mic night. I'm getting heckled over here.
No, I'm not heckling you. I'm just saying it's so ludicrous that you can tell your attorney you're...
Okay. So Ainsley Earhardt is saying it's ludicrous. Brian Kilmeade is saying it's ridiculous. And Steve Doocy is absolutely correct about lawyers testifying and the crime fraud exception. It's not controversial, and it actually has been used many times. So the crime fraud exception is a legal principle which allows certain confidential communications, like, for example, those between an attorney and their client, to be disclosed in court if they were made to further the commission of a crime or a fraud. So if you use your attorney-client relationship to plan or carry out a crime or fraud, then it's not protected by attorney-client privilege. It's actually a really simple legal principle. So if you have a lawyer and you consult with your lawyer to commit a fraud, to cover up a crime or whatever, those conversations, those communications could be subject to the crime fraud exception. They aren't protected by attorney-client privilege. That is what Trump and Michael Cohen were doing. Then when Steve Doocy explains it to Brian Kilmeade, Kilmeade moves on to, well, it's never used. Well, hold on a second. That's it. Now that is a different argument. How does Brian Kilmeade know that? Does he cover trials enough to know whether or not it's actually used? And the answer is, of course he doesn't. And the truth is that the frequency of the crime fraud exceptions, it's difficult to determine because it does depend on the circumstances. And it's not like there is public journalism around every use of the crime fraud exception. Most court cases aren't reported on in the way that we would be able to say, here's the frequency of the use of the crime fraud exception. But there are some pretty prominent examples of it being used. The Enron scandal, if you haven't read, what's the name of the book? I think it's The Smartest Guys in the Room or something like that. If you haven't read the book about the Enron scandal, I recommend it. In the early 2000s, Enron was engaging in all sorts of accounting fraud, and it led to its bankruptcy. And during the investigation, that crime fraud exception was indeed used with regard to communications between Enron executives and their lawyers because it helped to establish those fraudulent activities. So that's a very prominent case in which it was used. The Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. When Bernie Madoff was arrested for running that huge Ponzi scheme and defrauded investors to the tune of billions, The crime fraud exception was also used to obtain privileged communications between Madoff and his lawyer, and it revealed Madoff lied to his investors and his lawyer about the existence of the fraudulent scheme. So it is the law, and it is used, including in prominent cases. Kilmeade is wrong. Ainsley Earhart is breathlessly out of control. Steve Doocy is the guy that's correct. And on Fox and Friends, you aren't exactly rewarded for introducing sanity and fact. As I've mentioned before, I supplement my diet with vitamins every day. I've tried different methods. None have been simpler or more cost-effective than just a daily scoop of AG1 from our sponsor, Athletic Greens. With the one scoop, I get the 75 high-quality vitamins and minerals from whole food sources that I want. I'm covered for the day. I'm not messing around with different vitamin capsules, and then some have 200 and some have 180, so they run out at different times. And it's a mess. It's a mess. This is simple. The taste is good. You can put it in water, juice, or shakes. Each serving is under $3 a day. Compare that to what all of the individual supplements would cost you, and it just makes sense. Simplify your life by starting the day with a scoop of 75 high-quality nutrients. When you go to athleticgreens.com/Pacman, you'll get a free year supply of vitamin D. I've talked about vitamin D before, and 5 free travel packs of AG1. The link is down below.